Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Join me today. He's the mental strength and conditioning coach, author, and speaker. It's Gary Fahey. How are you doing today, Gary?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Alex, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're so excited to hear all about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do is with our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what were you involved in growing up.
Yeah, look, I suppose I'd like to call myself a regular guy from Western Sydney. It's a working class area of New South Wales in Australia. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from around your parts. But yeah, regular guy. We grew up playing sports. Rugby league was our sport of choice where we were. Cricket, again, perhaps not games that are too familiar, but that was what we did back then. I was okay at school. Had a good group of friends. When I grew up, there's no internet, no Facebook, no Instagram, so we were outside, until the street lights came on. That was growing up, and that pretty much sustained me for most of my childhood, teens. Always into sport, always hanging around with people, and enjoying team activities. And then subsequently ended up joining our federal police and spent a good 18 years there. So it was a pretty standard upbringing, good family. My parents are still together. We're still very close. I'm an only child. Probably explains some of my behavior, but it was pretty standard for me, or I thought it was standard anyway.
What was something you enjoyed about each of the sports that you played? Like you said, rugby and cricket are not something that's big in the United States, but I didn't get into rugby until college. But ever since then, I'm like enjoy it and try to watch it as much as I can.
Yeah, look, there's not a lot of comparisons in or ability to compare sports across the countries, but if you were going to line them up, our rugby league is probably as close to your NFL. If there was something that was similar in the US, cricket is baseball. What I loved about both of them is the team aspects. Actually being a part of a team and having your job being important to the team's outcome, and other people relying on you. I suppose it was, it's something that I enjoyed even through my careers as I've moved forward, has been being the guy that people could rely on, and being part of a team is something where that comes to the fore. And you make some great mates. You have lifelong friendships. When you go through tough times with people, you work your ass off, and you're training hard and you're working hard, and you go into games every week, you end up forging some lifelong friendships. So that's probably the best part about it.
Growing up, you said you were an only child. Did you kind of use your friends as family in a way? They were the people that you went to for advice or other things, just that conversate like siblings would?
Yeah, but potentially. I mean, I was, excuse me, I was very fortunate that my parents were very involved in my upbringing. So, my dad was my best mate growing up. I played a lot of football at home with him. I played a lot of cricket at home, wrestling, and the things you might have done with older or younger brothers and sisters. I tend to remember doing a lot with my father, and I was also really close to mum. So I went a lot of places with my parents, and our family friends had kids around my age, so they tended to be very close family friends. And it's probably fair to say that I've had friends growing up that I've considered family, and I've had we've had family friends, and their families have been considered family. So my network's probably wide, depending on what the issues were. I probably went to multiple people, and I was very fortunate that my parents exposed me to a lot of kids my age, some a little older, some a little younger, so that I had those experiences and didn't miss out on not having brothers and sisters.
As you were getting older, did you have a dream that you're going for, or a dream job that you were wanting to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, into my teens, I was very interested in joining our federal police. I ultimately ended up there because of a conversation I had with my mum when I was about 14. I spoke to her 14, 15, 16 about my desire to join the federal police. It's a It was something that excited me. It was something that I thought would keep me energized and also be a challenge. And I always had that dream, but it kind of went away a little bit in that I learned that I had to either have a university degree or a number of years of life experience. So I put it on the back burner to go and do university. And as luck would have it, about a year after I finished university, my mum called and said, "Remember when you wanted to join the federal police? Well, they're hiring." And 18 years later, I'd had a very good career there.
Something with with us in the States, usually you go to an academy and then you go into the police force. What makes it so different with going to university? Is it more about learning and getting a variety of knowledge and skills there, and then you can take it into the federal police?
Yeah, I think so. We still had a police college that we went to, or an academy of sorts that we went to go into the federal police. What I think they were searching for at the time, and still look for, is an element of additional life experience. So we didn't just finish school at 17, 18 and have never been anywhere, have never thought outside of the school environment. So another 3-4 years at university adds an additional discipline to a young cadet or recruit. It puts another 3 or 4 years on their age, so there's an element of maturity that comes in there. It wasn't just university. There was, you could have had time in another police agency, the military, lived experience, traveled overseas. A lot of it, I think, probably came down to time more so than what the activities were. So I think it might have been more along the age bracket. If we had been 18 going in, it was completely different to 22 years old.
You mentioned that you kind of lost the passion. When did you kind of realize that you talked about the year after, was that always the end goal, was to get into the federal police? Or did you kind of have a different idea of what happens if I don't make it? What do I fall back on?
Yeah, so I think when I learned that for myself, the university path was the most likely way I was going to be able to get into the federal police, and so I took that option. And something I had always loved to do was, I was PE at school. Health. I was always interested in health and fitness and the body, and so I did a health science degree in order to become a physical education teacher. And to be honest, probably what happened was I wouldn't say I forgot about joining the federal police, but I really enjoyed the health science degree. I really enjoyed, attempting to become a PE teacher. And so I just had let the federal police slip from my mind. At the time when I did join, they hadn't recruited for about 5 years. So it wasn't something that was ever in the paper, something that I could ever, that I kept in touch with. So it wasn't that it went away. I just had another priority that was ultimately going to help me if and when the opportunity came up to get into the federal police anyway.
Talk about that first year in the federal police. What was going through your mind, and how was that feeling for you?
Yeah, well, look, I was 22, and so it's it was an exciting time for me. I grew up like everybody else. You watch the movies and you watch TV, and there is a part of you that thinks / hopes that that's what your career is going to be like. And there are elements of the job that that do have a little bit of Hollywood about them, and there is that excitement there. There's also a lot of other elements to the role, but I was very lucky. In my first year, I managed to return back to where I lived. So our federal police are all over the country, but I managed to go back to where I lived in Sydney. And within a very short space of time, I was on a customs boat out in the middle of nowhere, following boats up and down the water, looking for a drug importation. And as it so happened, I'll be honest, I didn't do a lot while I was out there. I was new and I didn't know what I was doing, but it ultimately became the biggest white powder seizure that Australia had seen at that time, and that probably just excited me. As I said, I was watching more than doing, I was probably 4 or 5 months out of the academy when, I'm on a customs boat, seizing 500 kilograms of cocaine, which I appreciate is probably not that big a number in the US, but for us, it was huge. And, and it just really opened my eyes that this is going to be an exciting career if I choose and make good choices while I'm in there.
Was fear ever a big issue for you, or did you know that you could expect anything that could be in front of you?
Look, I think there was a little bit of youthful exuberance and brashness at that time. Being 22, and probably for most of my career that I don't think you are drawn to those jobs if you are instinctively a fearful person. So the first point is probably it's not the first thing that you think about. I will say, as different roles came up and different things that I went through, there's probably two elements of fear that I vividly remember considering. One was, as I got a little bit older, I always wanted to make sure I worked hard enough, trained hard enough, and worked on my skill enough so that it wasn't necessarily that I needed to be overconfident or arrogant, but that I was as prepared as I could be for as many circumstances as possible. And I think with that preparation, fear is diminished. It's not totally removed. You're still always nervous about what you're going into. Secondly, I started to discover that a lot of the fear that I had was post events. The adrenaline of what I was going into seemed to override a conscious fear process. As I said, there was always an element of nerves. I think some of the adrenaline, some of the excitement was fear driven. It's just the way that we were able to channel it. But often at debriefing circumstances, I'd sit down and think about what we'd just done and realize that the circumstances could have gone differently. And again, that just motivated you more to get on top of your game, train harder, work on your skills so that, if something does go wrong, you're in as good a place as you can to deal with it.
Was there any time in your days in the federal police that you were proud of what you were doing and felt an accomplishment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to say my career was littered with those moments. I spent a number of years early in my career in drug importation and doing surveillance for drug importation. So we were, fortunate enough to take a lot of drugs off the street at that time. That especially coming from a school teaching background as well, I always used to imagine that what I was taking off the streets was heading for the kids that I used to teach. And so that brought me, an added level of joy and pride. I'd also, I was probably fortunate at the time that I was in that we also lost a lot of experience out of the federal police, and a couple of roles that ordinarily would have taken 5 or 10 years to get into, I managed to get in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It's certainly not an event I'd like to have over, but September 11 made a big difference to my career when we expanded our close protection network on the back of the September 11. And so I joined close protection and ultimately ended up running the Australian Prime Minister's protection detail. Again, another supremely proud moment, but that career was littered with proud moments. Going to East Timor on 3 hours notice, to try and help with civil unrest. I took off to Indonesia 6 days after our embassy was bombed to set up some protection on our ambassador over there. And when you get put into those circumstances and achieve a desired outcome, you do feel proud that not just me, but the team and the organisation and the government can put things into place that come off well. And at the end of my career, I ended up running the Commissioner's office as well. So it was another proud moment for me to be recognised as somebody that was not just good operationally, but also was capable strategically and with the relationships as well. So over 18 years, there was plenty of moments that I look back on fondly for sure.
What's the biggest thing the federal police has taught you about yourself?
The biggest thing it's probably taught me about myself is that being open, available to opportunity, and saying yes um, is often going to lead you to expand your horizons, expand your opportunities. Even if it doesn't work out, saying yes and being open to opportunity was something that really benefited my career. And you know, you will also confront people that are negative towards you when you're, you know, I got a lot of jobs because I said yes. I got a lot of opportunity because I said yes. And, you know, some that I mentioned there, you know, heading to East Timor on 3 hours notice. Well, my boss knew that if he rings 4 or 5 other people, it's going to take him, you know, 2 weeks to try and find someone to say yes. Ultimately, they come to people that are prepared to, you know, put themselves out for the team. So, you know, it's helped me to say yes, you know, in my next life, I suppose, and chase opportunity and be open to that when it comes.
Before you learned that about yourself, were you not a person that said yes to everything, or did you kind of have to analyze what the opportunity was before you actually went and did it?
I probably just never considered it, to be honest. I never really put myself into that space, and maybe it was just that, you know, as I matured in the police, that it became more apparent to me. You know, I had a safe job as a teacher before I joined the police. So potentially I'd already started down that saying yes path or being open to opportunity path before I joined. But it wasn't something that was that I recognized, I suppose, until, you know, probably midway through my career. And it probably did come up to me when people were negative about me getting a number of opportunities, and my response ended up being, well, that's usually because when the opportunity comes my way, I say yes. I don't worry about something I've got on next weekend or 3 weeks time, or that Christmas is coming up, or, you know, and you know, I enjoyed being that guy too. That was part of what I enjoyed out of my roles there. But it's probably something I had in me for most of my life, but something I recognized as my, you know, career continued on.
When you took those opportunities and said yes, you said that people kind of were saying, like, why do you get that, and things like that. Was that more of a positive confidence, not like an arrogant confidence?
Yeah, look, I think if you're referring to, you know, the people that would talk about it, you know, we see these in all forms of life, and you know, I work with a lot of that type of you know, mindset nowadays is to look for something else to blame when we're not successful. And, you know, you'll see it all over the world, where people will say that somebody got the promotion because they play golf with the boss, or, you know, that person got the promotion because they sleep with the boss, or that person, you know, it just happened to be lucky because they were born into the right family, or, you know, it's a lot easier to try and find an excuse why the other person got the role. And you know, I was a victim of that. You know, and to be fair, I was friends with my bosses, but I also got a lot of heat from my bosses. It put a lot of pressure on when when you're friends with the boss. And I didn't become friends with the boss and then I got jobs. I was saying yes to work, and ultimately, you know, if you have a character that resonates with another person, and you know, you're going to become friends over time, irrespective of whether they're bosses or not. And you know, ultimately, what I found is most people in positions of power or responsibility don't choose people because they're their friends. They choose them because they can get the job done. Because if they don't get the job done, everybody loses out. So it's, you know, but it's an easy argument for somebody that misses out to say you only got it because you're friends. They fail to see the amount of hours that you put in, the extra hours that you put in, the study that you put in, the going overseas at a moment's notice that you put in, the missing out on families' birthdays and Christmases that you put in that they're not prepared to. All of those things count. But yeah, it's often easier to blame rather than to look inward.
And I think that's so true. I think a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes of what happens. Instead, they just look at the surface. And we all have that opportunity to make that difference. If we aren't getting that goal, we have the opportunity to make a difference and still reach that goal. If you're not getting that promotion, you always can ask, well, what can I do better to get to that promotion? So I think people love to take the blame nowadays, especially with social media, phones, the internet, everything. And it's just go out there and do it. Prove to yourself that you're able to reach that goal. If you want to go be a star in LA, you go and try to learn as much as you can. So I think it's so true. I was always one of those people that takes opportunities because you never know what can happen from that opportunity. It can always go a good way. It can always steer in a different way, but it's always a way for me to grow as an individual. So that's why I kind of agree with taking those opportunities, like you said.
Yeah, you're always going to get something out of taking an opportunity, even if it ends, in a way that you perceive at the time to be ends badly. There's lessons to take out of it. There's even just the inner strength of putting your hand up to do something that's uncomfortable. That's a skill that you can grow. And people, in all walks of life these days are very quick to blame and look for excuses because it genuinely is the easy option. I mean, if it's somebody else's fault, if I'm a victim, then I don't have to do anything, to make myself better. It's not my fault, and therefore I don't have to put myself out. That's the easy option, and that's fine. Look, people want to take that option. Good luck to them. What I have learned is that successful people don't often listen to the people that want to blame everybody else anyway. So it becomes almost a self-licking ice cream. The people that want to be the victim just talk to other people that want to be the victim, and they all get their little pity parties together. And and as I said, good luck. People are free to do whatever they like, and the results typically reflect people's attitude more so than more often than skill level anyway.
What was going through your mind coming to the near end of your career in the federal police? Were you trying to think what was next? Was there something going on in your life that was happening? What was going on?
Well, I think it's probably as good a time to any to talk about. My career didn't come to an end of my own decision, I suppose. I was there for 18 and a half years, and I was in the middle of these high pressure, high profile, high responsibility jobs. And but the last 10 years of my career, I was actually battling a major depressive disorder and a gambling addiction. And I was battling these silently, even for a long time from myself. I wasn't able to even admit or acknowledge to myself that I was battling these mental health issues. And ultimately, the end of my career came relatively abruptly because I made some very silly decisions with the use of my works credit card, the charge card for work. So transitioning out of work wasn't necessarily a long thought out process for me. It was probably inevitable, given the things that were going on in my life. And then I had to, I had some deep soul searching to do, and that wasn't immediate either. That took quite a little bit of time, but thankfully over the ensuing 4 years, I was able to work with a lot of experts from around the world. I was able to learn from them, and I was able to be coached, by a few of them, some of them just through YouTube, others through formal and informal relationships. And, I built my own transition process out of necessity. But it was something that kind of happened on the run as opposed to well planned out strategy.
You talked about a gambling addiction. What kind of started you getting into that kind of like game and stuff? Like, was it like your passion for sports and betting on sports? Was it the casino side? What kind of got you going?
Yeah, my gambling addiction of choice was usually horse greyhound race, like so racing type of betting. I'd been gambling since I was about 8 years old, I suppose. I remember putting bets on when I was 8. We used to have telephone betting, and I can remember putting bets on when I was 8. I remember being at our off-track betting facilities at 14, betting, $1.50, nothing that was out of the ordinary. And, I do mention in my book that there was other things I did when I was 8 that I don't have problems with these days. I probably had the first sip of beer when I was 4 or 5, just sitting on my dad's lap. And, I had my first cigarette when I was 8, but I don't smoke and I very rarely drink. So I'm not sure that just starting early was what got me into gambling. But what I did notice is, as in hindsight, looking back, as I was battling the depression, battling the anxiety, was that the only safe escape that I had was gambling. It was the only place where the noise would turn off 100% of the time. If I was gambling, I wasn't thinking about anything else. Sometimes that would work if I would go training. Sometimes it would work by listening to music. But gambling became the only place that I could really switch off for 100%, and I knew it was going to work. So I think over that last 10-year period, and it probably started earlier than that, but the gambling escape started to inculcate itself with my lifestyle, and as I was unable to deal with the deeper issues, the depression, the anxiety, the stress, as I was unable to even acknowledge those, I just started escaping more and more and more into gambling. And as I said, over that 10-year period, it cost me, a great deal of money, but it cost me a lot more than that over time as well.
Did your family or friends have any idea or kind of see a change in your behavior and attitude that kind of told them that something's going on because you didn't seem like yourself?
Most addicts would like to say no. We'd like to say that our family and friends can't notice things. Look, I'd also sought help for gambling issues as far back as 2007 and 8, and most of my issues came to a head in 2016. So I had spoken to family and friends about it being an issue in my past. I was also I was a very high performer in just about every area of my life. And I suppose that probably gave people false belief that I was doing okay. I'm also quite a loud, not necessarily confrontational, but alpha male. I don't necessarily back away from confrontation. And I do believe that some people, even though their gut instinct was telling them something was wrong, were probably not prepared to have that discussion for fear of it becoming confrontational. Humans inherently don't like confrontation. So, if they're not typically they're going to prefer to look for the positives and reasons why I didn't have any problems than to actually, make the courageous decision to stand in front of me and say, look, something's wrong. And whether you admit it to us now or not, we know, and we're going to work through that with you. But as I said, I think addicts would like to believe that people don't know as much as they do. Family and friends would probably like to believe they don't know as much as they do. But I think when we all look at it in hindsight, we tend to know that something was off. We do tend to notice changes within our friends, within our families. That's probably one of the messages that I do try and get out there. You've got to listen to your own gut instincts about yourself. It was something that I wasn't able to do for a long period of time. But you also got to listen to them about your family and friends as well. If something appears off, be courageous enough. I say to people now that I'd rather have a mate of mine no longer want to be my friend because I confronted them about their issue, than have them leave this world through suicide because I wasn't brave enough to have that conversation. So, fortunately for me, it did get that dark at times, but fortunately for me, I was able to, to avoid that sort of circumstance. But it's a very real situation that goes on.
When was that moment that it kind of turns into a positive light? Things were getting better. You were getting on a new track, basically.
Yeah, I used to tell people it was a moment. It was July 19, 2018. And I used, for about a year, maybe two, I was telling people that that moment was it. It was the one moment. I actually went to my nan's. My nan had passed. She's cremated with my grandfather, and I went to her gravesite, and I was, you know, I was brutally honest with myself about everything that, you know, all of my vulnerabilities, all of my issues, my mental health issues, who I'd hurt, how I'd hurt myself, you know, where I was stood in life, you know, where I should have been and could have been, and basically took ownership for, you know, for where I was. It was a very personal moment. It was very emotional. It was difficult, and almost the next day, life changed for me. You know, I still owed money because of my gambling issues, and I still had broken trust with family and friends. But my own mental state changed to the fact that I was now moving forward and not focused on the past. I've been holding this past for, you know, for a long time without being able to be honest with myself. So that was my I call it my come to Jesus moment. You know, was that July 19. But on reflection, it actually started in the September the year before. So it was probably a 9-month process, 10-month process that I, you know, James Clear in his Atomic Habits book talks about casting votes towards the person that you want to be. I talk about signaling to yourself who you are. And it was, you know, September 2017 where I had my darkest moments and had considered taking my own life. And at that time, I went to the doctor, went to the psychiatrist, went to the psychologist, went to gambling help. And I committed to myself that I would continue seeing those people every time I said I would. And it wasn't always smooth sailing. I was going to gambling help, but still gambling. But eventually I started to believe that I was a person who, you know, I went from a guy with a gambling problem to a guy who didn't want to have a gambling problem and tried to change, to a guy who was changing, and to a guy who finally changed. And now I don't even probably characterize myself as, you know, I had a gambling problem. I was a person with a gambling problem. But unlike a lot of people that suffer addiction and even mental health issues, that constantly remind themselves about how many days or that they've always got to be careful of the issues and the problems. That's not a way that I manage my mental health issues, my addiction issues. I don't go around telling people I still believe in Santa Claus because I did when I was 8 years old. I don't go around telling people I'm still a high school student because I was when I was, you know, 16. So I don't go around telling people that I'm an addict or have depression because I had, you know, a depressive disorder and addiction disorder 5 years ago. You know, that was part of my education, but it's not where I live anymore. So I've moved on from there.
Have you been able to like restrain yourself? Like if you're in those situations where you're near the track or you see it on TV or you hear about it, that you're able to tell yourself that I'm not going to get involved in this. I don't want to have to go back through the situations that I was in before. Are you able to kind of get yourself motivating, kind of branch off and to do something else so you're not in that situation?
Yes, 100%. It's you know, again, it took work. It took a process, but you know, it's funny. I always, for a long time, I actually thought it was the day after I went to see my nan, but surprisingly, I've come to learn it was the day before. The day before I went to see my nan, I'd probably already made the decision in my mind. I actually went to the races. My dad worked at the races, and it was his last day in the place that he was, and I went to the races. And I walked past all bookmakers. I walked past, you know, the races were on, and I didn't even have a thought to bet. I think I'd already come to this realization that, you know, my 9 months of work had paid off, and I was at this moment where the escape was no longer needed. I'd been honest with myself, and you know, we're in Australia here. You know, we have something like, I think it's something like 325 gambling ads on TV, on free-to-air TV every day.
Wow.
There's gambling is everywhere. Our pubs, you know, I can bet in a pub. I can play slot machines in a hotel. You know, I can ring up. I can have apps. So everywhere I go there is going to be something that is gambling related. So, it's something that I have to be conscious of. However, I think about gambling probably like anybody who doesn't have a gambling problem thinks about it. I don't pretend that I never think about it. If I see ads on TV, it's clear you're going to think about it, whether you're a gambler or not. You can't, I mean, I don't eat yogurt, but if I see a yogurt ad on TV, then I think about yogurt, right? So it's going to be something that comes up into my life. But what I have done is by working through my, the process that, kind of evolved in itself, I actually battled and beat the issues that underlied my gambling addiction. And in the end, my gambling addiction was revolved around escapism. And once I built my system, I no longer need to escape. So I don't have the deep drive to go gambling. Do I ever feel like putting a bet on? Sometimes I wonder, what if, if I put one on, will that start it up? But it's probably the same, as I said, I don't smoke. And so I don't see people smoking and start thinking to myself, well, maybe I should have one and see if I'm going to, take it up. It's just part of, it's part of my history. And as I said, I think I've worked well enough on my mental strength that it doesn't actually come up as an issue for me. I sit in the pub watching the races. I talk to my dad about the races. In fact, I'm having conversations with going to work with some of the jockeys with my, mental strength and conditioning coaching. It doesn't offer any fear for me at all.
Have you been able to rebuild the trust and the relationships that were kind of strained during this time? You talked about it with your friends and family.
Yeah, with some, not with others. It's very difficult. So on the back of my issues at work, I used the works credit card, to fund some parts of gambling, some parts of my lifestyle that I couldn't, food because I couldn't afford because I'd gambled my money away. And so that resulted in some criminal proceedings for me. Very difficult for your police friends to be friends with somebody that's, goes through those criminal proceedings, I presume. And all of those, to be fair, dropped off. A couple stayed with me for a while, or probably as long as they could. But there was also a long period of time where after I got in trouble at work, I was still struggling to be a trustworthy person. I was still struggling with my own, issues. And so gradually I lost the couple that stayed with me. Excuse me. I also lost my partner. She was part of the police as well. She wasn't a police officer, but she stuck with me for a very long time. But again, I wasn't somebody that was capable of making the right decision or good decisions in our relationship to do with trust around gambling and money. And ultimately that dissolved as well. And, that's a place that I don't think, trust will ever be rebuilt, friendship will ever be rebuilt, connection or relationship would ever be rebuilt there. And, it's sad. I wish that those circumstances were different and, with all my friends, but there's also a reality to life. I don't spend time dwelling on the fact that it's not going to happen. I understand why it wouldn't happen. And so I move forward. And but then I've also had a lot of my parents, our family, friends, and to be honest, a lot of new friends have come into my life that came in knowing the story, came in when I was struggling, really stuck by me through thick and thin as well. And it's probably made a lot of those relationships a lot more honest now that I'm able to be that guy that I wish I was before. So I think I have better relationships now because I'm a lot more comfortable with who I am, and I'm able to be the person that I should be in a relationship.
What made you want to write a book, and what's the main message you hope someone gets out of it when they're reading it?
Yeah, the day I got in trouble at work, I started writing. I think I just started writing. I'll be honest, I was probably looking to blame somebody else. So I started writing all the things that everybody else had done wrong so that I could get out of the trouble that I was going to be in. But as I kept writing and writing, and the book that I released a few weeks ago, it looks a lot different than it would have looked if I released it 2 years ago, because I'd done a lot more work on myself. it's really written in two parts. And the first part is my story, I suppose. There's a little bit about, how I got to the top of my game in the, in the police force. And there's also a lot about how it feels to go through depression, how it feels to struggle, not necessarily with addiction, but any sort of feelings of internal alignment issues where you're somewhere in life that you're just not comfortable with, or everybody looking at you thinks that you're successful, but you're just not feeling the same way. You're not feeling fulfilled. You don't feel like you're meeting out your purpose. Or as I described it, I knew I was struggling for a long time, but I didn't know with what, and I knew even less what to do about it. I was successful. I was in a very good job. I had a good family. I had a good car, a good house. I had all these things that people told me I should have, that even I believed I should have. But for some reason, I just wasn't, quite right. And so the first part is about how that feels and how you can get there. And it's not about gambling addiction per se. It's not about depression, but it really is a story of how anyone can start to feel like they don't belong, or they're not where they're supposed to be. And then the second half is actually the process I went through, that I built, that I now coach people to come through those circumstances. And I kind of describe it as taking you from where you are now to where you want to be. And it doesn't matter if you're bouncing off rock bottom like I was, or you're on the edge of greatness. There's people that are just about to break through that. They haven't yet quite got set on what their purpose is, what their goals are. And then they haven't built the strategy to get there. And the back half of the book is that strategy.
When you're helping clients, do you feel that you're doing your part in helping others, like people have helped you get to where you are today?
A little bit of yes. But to be honest, the way I describe it is that I feel like my shit has to be worth something. Excuse me for the language if you're not
It's all good.
on the show, but I feel like my shit has to be worth something. I went through a lot of pain. It was all self-induced. I brought it upon myself, but I also, shared that pain around family and friends. And to me, it has to be worth something. There has to be a reason why that part of my life existed. And it would be very easy to ride off into the sunset and just, I've got a small gym here in Brisbane. I could just, run that and work as a personal trainer and be quiet about it. But that wouldn't probably honor, if that's the right word, the path that I'd taken. And so in reality, I started working with people that were struggling, and I still do, especially successful people that are struggling is probably my niche. But then I started working with people that were like me, 15 years ago, on the edge of success. They've got all the skills. They just need to, put it all together to move forward. And, it really is just, repaying what pain I've been through. There's a quote by Fyodor Dostoevsky that says, all I wish is to be worthy of my suffering. And, I've put a hell of a lot of people through a hell of a lot of suffering. And there's a part of me that thinks that this is what I need to do. This is my purpose, and the reason why I went through it. So that's why I end up here, and I love it. I could do it all day, every day. The amount of different people you get to meet, you get to work with, inspire, change lives, save in some sense. I could do this all day.
So what does the future look like for you? What are you hoping to accomplish personally and professionally in the next couple of years?
Yeah, look, personally, I want to keep on my journey. I'm in the best place that I've ever been. In myself. I had my gambling addiction cost me $2 million. When you have a $2 million addiction, you don't come out of that lightly. There's still parts of my life that I'm working on to become better, or to be as good as I was. But personally, I want to keep the journey going. What I have found is when you have strict and absolute goals, you typically stop once you reach them. And my objective is to never have a strict goal, to keep working towards the next best version of what I can be for myself, for my family, for my wealth as well, and also also for my relationships and my health. So that's on a personal level. Professionally, look, my goal is to impact as many people as I can. I was talking to somebody yesterday about, I don't have a number, because if I set it at 1,000 people and it ends up being 100, I'll be miserable. If I set it at 1,000, it ends up being 2,000. Well, what does that mean? It's as many people as I can, and I would like to build a new wave of mental strength and conditioning, I suppose, mindset coaching, mental health coaching, for those people that are successful and struggling. I got to a point in my life where I started making silly decisions around money, but guys and girls they'll start to consider cheating on their partner. They'll start to make risky decisions in business. They'll let their health go, all because they're not able to have that brutal conversation with themselves. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a woo-woo guru. If people come and see me, they're going to get some brutal truth. But I'd like to inspire and encourage as many people as I can to say, if you're successful and you don't feel it, there's something you can do about it.
The final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
The very first thing that everybody should do if they want to rise to the challenge, if they want to overcome any obstacle that they have in their life, is to be brutally honest with themselves. Sometimes that comes with pain. Sometimes that comes with upsetting other people, and it's brutal honesty without conditions. It can't be I want to make $1 million, but I'm not prepared to X, Y, and Z. You have to be honest with yourself about what it is that you want. If you love money more than your family, you have to be honest about it. You cannot tell people that you love your family and inside that's a lie. If you love your family more than you love money, then you have to make some decisions about what work you want to do. Something that's going to allow you to spend more time with your family. You have to be brutally honest about what success means to you. It doesn't mean what Instagram tells you. It doesn't mean money in the bank. I work with a lot of people that success for them is being able to spend Saturday and Sunday with their kids' soccer. That's important to people. That's success. It doesn't have to be, what you perceive it to be or what you've been conditioned to believe. So you have to be brutally honest with yourself. You have to be prepared to upset yourself. You don't have to go around telling the world. You don't have to run up to your parents and, be brutally honest with them and tell them how much you hate them because you love money or anything like that. But you have to start with yourself. You have to be honest about what it is you want, who you are as a person. And when you have that clear, build a strategy to get there and follow it.
Well, Gary, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we're excited to see what the future has for you.
I appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for having me on, and good luck with the podcast mission.